All right, I guess we'll get started. It looks like we're just about ready. Hello and welcome to the 2022 OHDSI International Symposium. Welcome and welcome back to our in-person symposium. It's so wonderful to see everyone. It's so wonderful to see a filled room. We did not know how it was going to go this year. Remnants of COVID, changes in the way we do our work, and a lot of logistical problems in travel nowadays, and so we thank you all for coming. And we have like literally a filled room, so this has been wonderful. My name is George Hripcsak. I'm director of the OHDSI Coordinating Center set at Columbia University, and I'm chair of biomedical informatics there. I'm going to base a lot of my talk on this book, which was outside, and if you haven't picked it up already, you can pick it up right after the session and work my way through it. Our Journey, which describes, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. At any OHDSI symposium, there are a lot of people who have been here many times since we started in 2013, but a large proportion of newcomers. So this welcome talk, I like to go over a little bit of going over where we've been to bring those people up to date. It's a wonderful book, and I want to thank Craig Saxon, who's the lead editor of the book and put this thing together. I want to thank the FDA, CBER, for their generous support of the 2022 symposium through the FDA Scientific Conference Grant Program. And we're going to come back to the FDA in a little bit later. But we can applaud anyway. I want to thank the OHDSI Scientific Review Committee. We're blessed with a lot of submissions, and we want this to be a scientific conference, but it's a lot of work reviewing all those submissions, so thank you to the Review Committee for all the work they put in. And thank you to all those who made today happen. I want to, in particular, thank Elise Katzman, who's the kind of lead designer of our symposium and the logistics, and has done a spectacular job. And it's a huge, you can imagine how stressful it is to put on a symposium in another city, not having funding for it when you started, but knowing that you're going to be feeding, 500, imagine putting on a wedding for 500 people, not knowing if you're going to pay, and it's in another city somewhere. So thank you to Elise. Also on this list, I'll just say that we have people who help pay for it, find the money to pay for it, the volunteers who are out helping us run the thing smoothly. Some components of this weekend involve computing resources, LTS Computing, AWS, and IQVIA. Thank you for the donations for that. And then I'm not allowed to do this, and I won't get another chance. There's someone behind the scenes who created us and keeps us going, Patrick Ryan. All right, so enough of that stuff. Now back to work. OHDSI's mission is to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. And we always say this mission because we remind ourselves what has made us strong over the years is focusing everything we do, bring it always back to our mission. Don't create a database, create evidence. Create a database in the process as a means to the end, which is improving health. OHDSI's values are innovation, reproducibility, community, collaboration, openness, and beneficence. And I'm glad that we've been working on these, and we really do talk about this at the leadership meetings, at the work groups. We care about these values, and we try to bring it forward, and we welcome feedback when we're not doing these things well. To the newcomers, how does OHDSI work? Well, our goal is clinical evidence generation, seen on the lower right, and we do work in methodologic research. We build open source tools, and we create data standards, or at least we try not to create data standards, to be honest. We try to use data standards, but we do have to select them and sometimes assemble them. Then we have our OHDSI network. How does that work? You keep your data local. What you do is you convert your data, because our data comes from around the world. So we convert our data to a common data model, and then we apply tools and standards so that we can carry out research. We have many data partners spread around the world, and we want to carry out a study. We first say what we're going to do ahead of time, and we're going to be talking a lot about reliability in the course of the day. But the first thing we do is pre-specify a protocol with a detailed specification of the analysis so we can't cheat. We send the package that gets executed around the network. People voluntarily execute it and send back standardized summary statistics results to a central repository, which is generally on the internet, so the world can see our results before we can, and therefore we can't cheat on it. And then we work together to collaboratively interpret the evidence and publish the results. So that's more or less how OHDSI works. Here's our current collaborators mapped from around the world. By one metric, we're 3,200 collaborators. That's according to the Teams license that people who have registered. So that's where I get that number from. 80 countries, 21 time zones, and 6 continents, but all coming to work together as one. Here's our common data model, now up to version 5.4. Again, the important thing here is this data model, this is the data schema for that model, and it's driven by the research, and that's what's important about the OHDSI standards or the OHDSI selection of standards. Always looking to make evidence, to create evidence, and doing what's necessary to achieve that. Not to create a database that goes nowhere, but to actually use that database. And so the schema is set up so it's understandable. New people can join it and kind of get a feel for it fairly quickly and start using it. As my mentor used to say, is it flexible and extensible? And I think our model has proven to be, over its years since its, I guess, beginnings in the 2009, proven to be flexible and extensible. And the OHDSI vocabularies, we're pulling in data from around the world. And so we need to accommodate, right now, 135 vocabularies with a total of over 10 million concepts and 80 million relationships, pulling them all together into a coherent whole where we can collect the data and carry out research. And then we have our data network. Here's how the data is, here's the representation of the spread of our network around the world. 453 data sources, over 300 electronic health records, 30 administrative claims, and 34 registries as we start pulling in data from that source. 41 countries, and right now, 928 unique patient records as our best guess of the lower bound of how many patients have been converted to the OMOP common data model, which represents 12% of the world's population, which is pretty good as a voluntary network. No one else comes close. How do we get that number? That metric is more or less, for most countries, we take the biggest duplicated database and count that for that country, with a couple of exceptions where there's a country where we have a feel for how many patients are actually represented in our collection of databases for that country. There's a little bit of duplication in Europe, we recognize, but there's also a much greater loss because in many countries we have several databases and we're only counting one of them towards our total, and that's why I call this a lower bound of how many have been converted to the OMOP common data model. Now, for any given study, it's a voluntary network. It's a smaller number who participates, but it's still generally in the hundreds of millions of unique patients. OHDSI workgroups, the way we carry out our job is through these many workgroups shown on the screen. As you can see, the participation in that ranges. There are some earlier smaller workgroups with, say, 50 people or so, but up to about 500 people working together to do the work that makes OHDSI generate evidence. And we have our regional chapters to help us because we're a worldwide organization, and sometimes it helps to help each other out locally. We have these chapters. I'll point out on the lower right, the Taiwan chapter, which started about 2 years ago, is hosting the Asia Pacific Symposium in November. On the upper left, yay. On the upper left, the Africa chapter joined us last year, and our newest chapter right in the center from India. And we welcome them all and look forward to helping them out moving forward. OHDSI publications, I'll start off with our social network analysis, our fuzzy diagram. What I had done last year is I went through and I highlighted different clumps and said, here's how the community is represented. In my opinion, and I guess I haven't done the metric that proves this, so I have to apologize, but in my opinion, looking at them, we actually have fewer clumps. It's less interesting this year than last year to separate things out. Now you see that big dense cluster towards the middle, and then a little bit of a cluster in the lower right, and that one's a little bit separate, and that's, I think, mostly represents our collaborators who use the OMOP Common Data Model, like N3C, all of us. And so that represented as a group that tends to publish together and while they're part of the OMOP, the OHDSI community, they have their own community that they publish with. But then other than that, it's largely that dense ball in the middle. That's part of the success of OHDSI. So when I brag about our informatics department at Columbia, I do social network analysis and show that we're a dense ball, and the other basic science departments are this kind of sparse thing spread out, showing that we're on each other's grants, on each other's papers. And OHDSI is like an extreme example of that. And as I said, our success is in linking the generation of evidence back to the infrastructure we create to do that. And the main way we do that is the people that are generating the infrastructure are also generating evidence. People generating evidence are also helping out on the infrastructure. And it's in that way that we're able to create infrastructure that works, that serves a purpose. And so the data that go into our database come out as evidence and don't just sit dormant in the database. So the number, 475 publications about OHDSI. In this book, you'll see there's 22 pages dedicated to actually list every single one of the publications that we assign to that. Let me point and thank Paul Nagy for this, the OHDSI Community Dashboard. Paul's been a busy guy this past year. His name may come up a couple times. Publication analysis shown here are yearly and cumulative publications and citations, and the OHDSI researchers, and the bars represent new authors that year. So that's not number of total authors, the bars are non-cumulative, and then there's the cumulative number in the orange line. So we're growing quickly in these publications and many thousands of citations. And while I'm on the dashboards, I'll just point out the educational content, both the individual talks that we give that are saved by Craig as YouTube, viewed, 200,000 hours worth of viewing cumulative now, so that's been excellent. And then the Eden Academy with our more formal educational materials with thousands of views and completions of courses. So, that's a huge part of bringing people in to our network, and we're too big now to just, we need these formal methods to educate people. Back to publications. So I looked at the publications since January till about September. I looked at it as a strict hierarchy, so you can argue, because a lot of things really belong in 2 or 3 groups, but I did the best I could. And we see a few things reflected if you kind of look at the pie chart. This is my slide. Patrick helps me a great deal with these slides, and help me is a euphemism, but you can always tell my slides because they're like pie charts or just text. It's a strict hierarchy. One thing that's nice is we're getting close to half clinical. So when we started in 2013, we were really mostly methods and standards. And so but the goal was evidence, and now we're seeing that come to fruition. A large number of clinical publications, including COVID. Clinical is the blue, in red and green, although there are some methods mixed in the COVID, because again, it's a strict hierarchy, but for the most part, it's getting close to half of it. We have a strong COVID showing. A lot of that is from our hard work in 2020 and 2021. We're still doing a lot of work on COVID, but the publications are delayed after the work, so that's coming out. And a lot of work on vaccine safety, and I highlighted that in green just because I'm going to have a slide on that later. An important lever we've been working on, but I'm proud of the OHDSI community being able to turn on a dime and be able to produce that evidence. The common data model pie slice includes both the standard and the data network. What's interesting about that one is that that's the one that has the most outsiders publishing about OHDSI. So like a lot of the other ones are OHDSI, people who would be represented in this room and the broader community who joined us last year on the virtual one and so on. That's the one where we're talked about the most, and I'll come back to that in a later slide. Methods includes both the methods and the tools, including analysis and phenotyping, and I highlight patient-level prediction, which is small but increasing and an important thing. If you go back to your hospital, all the chief executive officers are talking about predictive analytics, and this is OHDSI's push in that area, in addition to the patient-level prediction that we do, normal evidence generation. Highlight a few fun things that happened this year. Phenotype February. And in February, each day we did a different phenotype. We drew broadly from the OHDSI community to do a different phenotype every day, look at both the development and evaluation of those phenotypes, pulling from junior people, senior people, and so on. Many of those coming out to some of those papers that I pointed to earlier. And what I liked about this, why I wanted to highlight this, is just an innovative approach, doing it slightly differently. So it's not quite a hackathon. That would occur like our COVID hackathon, but not our normal like weekly meeting, but somewhere in between the two. So looking at different ways of working together, kind of rapid fire, but still spread out over a month. Our 2022 OHDSI Developers Conference, thanks Paul Nagy and Adam Black for hosting that, as we work and on our new Hades work group coming together to help us make more formal, as our software, not just our standard, but our software gets more used around the world, we have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to everyone who uses the software. And so working on that. Recall last year we signed an agreement, not on this slide, with HL7 on the merger of OMOP and, not the merger, well, let's see, the collaboration of OMOP and FHIR, and Ed Hammond's in this room, who's the one who really instigated that collaboration. And you'll see tomorrow all day, in fact, not even all day, but into the night, is the FHIR OMOP session. So please join that if you can. This year we signed another agreement, this one with SNOMED International. So as you know, we've been using the SNOMOP vocabulary for a long time, but now we have a formal agreement with SNOMED, so it is official, that anyone in the world can use the anyone in the world doing OHDSI research can use the SNOMED vocabulary regardless of whether they're a SNOMED member nation or not. And in return, OHDSI gives feedback to the SNOMED initiative. So we're very pleased to have that collaboration. And we want to congratulate our partners in Europe for the Darwin EU award from the European Medicines Agency for a grant worth in the long run over tens of millions of euros to basically build the kind of evidence infrastructure that we've been fantasizing about. And we're pleased that they're moving forward. And we have our collaboration with FDA, which we'll be hearing about more in a little bit, but we're pleased with that one. I pointed out vaccine evaluation methods. As you can see, our collaboration with the FDA shown on the left, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and working on their protocols and helping them with their methods development and doing our own OHDSI research, evidence generation for vaccines. I highlight this one because, again, I think we need to look at the impact of our work. And so it depends on what units you want to do. And one unit is number of publications, but I don't think that really represents what change you've made in the world. So another unit, and I don't know how many networks even show up on the scale, is how many hundreds of millions of patients have you affected with the evidence you've generated. And so this one in particular, shown actually on the screen, and actually two of the papers there, was OHDSI's role in helping the European Medicines Agency turn AstraZeneca vaccine back on March 18th, 2021, a decision that affected 700 million people in Europe. So that's one, that's a 700 million person effect. Our OHDSI legend, where our evidence for ACE versus ARB seems to be accepted by the community, being highlighted in JAMA News and Circulation, published in Hypertension, and I'm guessing that the next guideline will use that evidence to change what happens to 140 million people, probably not in retrospect, but going forward for new hypertension patients. On the other hand, our hydrochlorothiazide chlorothalidone study was recognized and dismissed, but that was my paper. But we're counting in the hundreds of millions of people, so we're really having an effect. So now just a couple comments on, now if you, in this book, I have an opening letter and I talk about leadership. So first, leadership within OHDSI. Leadership's the foundation of an initiative. OHDSI's been hugely successful in growing leaders. When I became chair of the department 15 years ago, a friend, Bob Sedella, gave me the book Tao of Leadership, and it talks about what is leadership. And a successful group seems to lead itself. And I think what we have in OHDSI is leaders instead of bosses. That is, people who inspire, set examples, and give credit. I think we've done well there. We've pulled a diverse group from all around the world, from many different fields, whether it's academics, industry, or government, and at different career stages. We have leaders who are the most junior and the most senior. As you know, for transparency, as I mentioned, we moved to formal work groups. And so we've been helping the leaders of the work groups move forward with leadership summits and workshops, and helping. Thank you again to Paul for leading that initiative. And we're going to be talking about our Titan Awards, where we formally recognize our leaders, and we'll be doing that in a moment. Let me call out, we're always looking to find and grow new leaders, and we're especially interested in junior members of OHDSI stepping up and joining the work groups, occasionally forming new work groups to move forward. Now, instead of leadership within OHDSI, leadership of OHDSI, OHDSI is known for its common data model, as I mentioned earlier, and what we'd like to do is build our evidence reputation, not just our data model reputation. We want to be known as producing the best evidence. So, you could say we want to push the field forward, but, you push away from you. So what we want to do is pull towards us. We want to pull the field towards generating more reliable evidence. And you do that by setting an example, setting the standard for rigorous research. And in fact, a lot of today is about rigorous research, so stay tuned for the plenary session. This is just the welcome. But we want to pull the community towards us and also participate in producing that evidence, both because we think we need the evidence, because only if you produce evidence will you do the right levers in building the methods and the standards for producing that research. How do you get involved? Join the journey. Well, in the book is a little recipe for that. Join the forums, join our work groups, join our community calls shown on the left. These are every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern time, which is 4 or 5 hours before UT. 11, oops, thank you. 11 a.m. ET, so much, I'm in the ocean. 11 a.m. every Tuesday, which is 4 or 5 hours before UT still. On October 18th, the next call. So this Tuesday, welcome to OHDSI. Those of you who are new to the community, here for the first time, please join that call. And then the next one, we'll be talking about future directions of OHDSI. Here's the agenda. Because we're here together, we wanted to spend a lot of time interacting. So there's this morning session. Then right after this, we're going to go to work group connections. I'll talk about that at the end a little bit more, but that's spread around and end with Meet the Mentors, which will be outside. We'll talk about that session at the end of this hour. Then we'll come back for the plenary led by Martijn Schumi until lunchtime. Then we'll interact again for lunch. Then we'll have presentations related to helping regulatory authorities, especially in the setting of COVID and else. And then we'll again interact through the collaborative showcase in the room next door. Then we'll come back here for lightning talks. Then again, the collaborative showcase outside. And then we'll come back with the closing talk that Patrick Ryan will run and have our network reception. So we've organized it so a lot of time for interacting, then come together for plenaries and interacting. There's no sense in having you come all the way here and have you sit in a room just watching us the whole time. And then over the weekend, we have our full day tutorial tomorrow, which is completely full. I'm sorry about that, 140 members with a 100-person waiting list, but that's what we could fit in that room. And then our work group activities, Saturday, including that all day long and into the night fire OMOP work and other working groups, and then all hands work group meeting for everyone Sunday morning, followed by more work groups. So that's all I want to say about the welcome, and now I'm going to go into the next section to have our sponsors from FDA come and talk to us about their work on vaccines. So I'm going to do a little introduction of our colleague who we meet with every week. Dr. Patricia Lloyd will be joining us. She's a health statistician and joined the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research Office of Biostatistics and Pharmacovigilance in 2021. Prior to joining FDA, she was a supervisory statistician with the DC Department of Health, where she worked with vital records, hospital discharge data, and COVID-19 surveillance data. She also worked as a health statistician in the data linkage program at the CDC National Center for Health Statistics. She has a decade of experience working as a statistical programmer in the area of public health and received her PhD in epidemiology at the George Washington University and a master's degree in biostatistics from the Harvard School of Public Health. Please help me welcome Dr. Patricia Lloyd.
Good morning. Just going to make sure I set up my timer so I don't go over. All right. Let's put this to the side as well. Okay. All right. So good morning. My name is Patricia Lloyd, and I'm a health statistician, epidemiologist at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, or CBER. On behalf of the CBER surveillance team, we appreciate the opportunity to present and discuss COVID-19 vaccine safety monitoring within the U.S. BEST Initiative here at the OHDSI 2022 Symposium. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose, and all views presented here do not represent the views or policies of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research regulates biological products, as shown here, including blood, human tissue, cellular products, gene therapy, xenotransplantation products, as well as vaccines. The Biologics Effectiveness and Safety, or BEST Initiative, partners with federal agencies, commercial data partners, as well as academic partners and members of the OHDSI team to accomplish our mission. In fact, there is ongoing work with members of the OHDSI Methods Research Group to explore additional methods to improve vaccine safety surveillance. BEST has access to administrative claims, healthcare data of a very large proportion of the US population, and it has good demographic representation. We receive weekly updates for Medicare data and receive data every 2 to 4 weeks for commercial databases. BEST also has access to a number of electronic health records with data lag of a few days, covering tens of millions of patients. This system is a distributed data network, and partners follow the OHDSI standardized OMOP common data model to ensure standardization across all of the system. So this morning I'll describe how this surveillance system is critical to COVID-19 vaccine safety surveillance. The first 2 COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna were authorized in the US in December 2020, and mainly for the adult population. In mid-2020, in collaboration with the CDC and other federal agencies, we developed a plan and a protocol to conduct rapid cycle analysis, or RCA, also referred to as near real-time surveillance, which is a sequential monitoring method of both vaccines. This protocol is posted on the BEST Initiative website in February 2021 and included monitoring of both vaccines for 17 distinct adverse events. And here I just show you the website, as well as several of the protocols that you will see on the website as well. So near real-time surveillance, or RCA, is a signal detection method and the fastest and first safety screening method that was applied to any of our new vaccines. We first started descriptive surveillance of vaccines and adverse events of special interest, or AESIs, and as more people received the vaccine and vaccine exposure data accrued, we conducted sequential testing. Our surveillance covered the elderly and adult population first, and as the vaccines received authorization and recommendation for younger age groups, the younger age groups were then added to our surveillance activities. When the Jan-Sep vaccine received authorization, that too was added to the RCA. So these are working lists of the AESIs for the adult and pediatric populations. These, or the majority of AESIs, I should say, were decided at the beginning of the surveillance before COVID-19 vaccines were actually available. To select these potential AESIs, we considered serious events that have followed other immunizations, potentially related to novel platforms or adjuvants, and those related to vaccine failure, immunogenicity, or enhanced disease, or are potentially specific to or recommendations from other surveillance systems, as well as events that are potentially specific to a particular population of interest. I use the word working to emphasize that additional events could be added after the surveillance monitoring has begun, if it rises to the level of concern. So in February 2021, we initiated near real-time surveillance using Medicare administrative claims data that covered over 60 million people over 65 years of age and older. This was followed by near real-time surveillance for the 16 to 64-year-old population using the 3 largest US commercial administrative claims covering 1 to 200 million people under age 65 years. In addition, as Pfizer BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines received authorization for younger children, we extended the RCA to cover that age group using the 3 large commercial claims data sources. In June of this year, the Moderna vaccines received authorization for the 6-month to 17-year age group. So currently we are conducting a pediatric RCA for both Pfizer BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. The monovalent and bivalent booster doses are also included in analyses of signal detection in adult populations, and as of this week, in the pediatric population. So as we identify potential safety signals from our RCA studies, or RCA studies led by the US Centers for Disease Control Prevention, CDC, as well as the US Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS, led by FDA and CDC, and results from other data sources, we conduct fully adjusted epidemiologic studies or signal evaluation studies to follow up on any potential safety signals that were detected. These have included studies of 4 vascular outcomes detected in the RCA within the Medicare population. Another such study evaluated the signal of myocarditis pericarditis in adults aged 18 to 64 years in the commercial RCA. And currently, we are conducting a self-controlled case series study of monovalent boosters in the Medicare population. And to keep the public informed of our work, we publicly disseminate the study protocol as well as any study results as they become available. In a press release, we communicated findings of the 4 potential AESIs that were detected in near real-time surveillance or safety monitoring or through the RCA. And this was in a press release shown in the top right. Additionally, we published results from our analyses of myocarditis pericarditis in adults earlier this year, also shown here on this slide, and more recently, results from our safety monitoring study of 17 outcomes among adolescents and adults aged 12 to 64 years were released last month. So with that, I want to close this presentation by thanking the BEST team for assistance on these slides, as well as the OHDSI Symposium Leadership Committee by allowing us to present today. If you're interested in learning more about BEST, there are 2 opportunities today. First, you can listen to a presentation entitled OHDSI Support for Regulatory Authorities at 1 p.m., where our OHDSI collaborators will share methods that are being explored to improve vaccine safety surveillance. And second, you can also stop by the FDA BEST exhibitors table. So thank you very much.